I see Agile 2, and I see another beautiful picture of you with flowers
Okay,
behind
all
you.
right, but that's all you see?
So
All
that
right,
is
let me see if
awesome.
okay.
So everybody, I'd like to introduce Philippa, who is wonderful. She was one of the founders and co-authors of Agile 2, and we recently did a podcast with her, and her and Lisa Cooney were absolutely wonderful. Really enjoyed it. It looks like Lisa is on here, but I'm not sure. She's not showing
Yeah,
her
so
face.
Lisa is coming back from vacation, so I think she's just dialing in for audio purposes, but
Okay.
I'm happy to have her with me, and if there's a question I can't answer, maybe she can. You'll never know. So,
well, that's great. That's great. So we're grateful to have you here.
okay.
If anyone would like to stay in contact with each other, you're welcome to post your LinkedIn profile in the chat. And I do have a request. If I'm going to send you guys a YouTube channel, and I would love it if you guys would subscribe to the YouTube channel, because that's the new podcast that I'm helping to host, and I would love to include everyone. So so that's little shameless there, shameless plug. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Philippa. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody for having me. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Agile 2 and what it is and how it came to be. And if you have questions, I'll try to answer them at the end. I don't have a real long presentation. I don't want it to be death by PowerPoint. And I'll try to answer them. And if we also tried to answer a lot of questions from previous talks on the Agile 2 LinkedIn group. So you'll find a lot of information there as well. So I don't know if you know much about me, but I've been in software development is my background. I was a developer for a long period of time, and I was an Oracle DBA for a period of time, and I've probably done just about every role. And I've been in the software business for 38 years, so that dates me prior to when Agile even started. And the company that I'm with is a company called CC Pace, and CC Pace actually started working with Kent Beck and XP back in 1998 after our CIO went to a conference and met Bob Martin there. So our group at CC Pace has been doing it for a really long time, and I've been practicing as an Agile coach and trainer probably since in the last 10 years or so. But again, my work is all with software development teams. That's kind of what I love to do, is just to work with software development teams. So a little bit about how, let me see if you can, Agile. So this is a quote from just one of Jeff Patton's blogs. Jeff Patton is known for his story mapping techniques and his writing on that. But so the question is, has Agile changed in the last 20 years? And I would expect that probably most of us would say yes. For one, Agile has grown to encompass a lot more than just the software. It's pretty much applied to any collaborative endeavor where people are working to produce something. It's much more than just the methods. Includes a lot of practices now, scaling frameworks, things like product management, human-centered design, value streams, anywhere that Agile can kind of be applied. So if we think of it outside the context of its original, the original manifesto, I think that it's probably changed a lot. The question would be has it changed for the better? And I think that that's a degree to which people, it really depends on who you're asking that question to. And that's what our team did. The team that put together Agile 2 is basically, that was our question. So I think that we have to look back at the Agile Manifesto in the context of when it was written. There are a lot of core ideas there, pretty powerful, extremely helpful at the time in moving software development forward. They really kind of made us think about what was really important. And although they didn't tell us exactly how to do it, perhaps it told us what wasn't working at the time. And I remember actually back in the days of when these things were put together, being on teams myself, even probably applying many of the things that the Agile Manifesto put out prior to even knowing the existence of Agile. I actually worked with some teams for the Nature company, And we were a co-located team just by the fact that it was easier for us just to kind of be in the same place at the same time and talk to one another. We had regular check-ins directly with our user base, testing small pieces of it as we went with them. So a lot of the things that we've learned that work for Agile back from what we've been taught, actually not necessarily new ideas, but they really brought it to the forefront. But I think we also have to remember that it was written in the context of its time. So there were, it was a time when, I even remember this also, having to work with very rigid, heavy methodologies, lots of governance, lots of documentation, lots of silos. Sometimes that we were even working where in the vendor space you had different vendors for different phases even that were involved. And so there was also this kind of micromanagement that was happening with the management of the development teams as well. But it really gave us some great ideas, and it's been really powerful and was pretty much a game changer for its time. So today, though, I think that there's some new narratives that have emerged and some practices that support those narratives, and some of them may be useful in the context of kernel of truth in them. But I think that they can also be really harmful if they're applied in a really extreme way. And during our Agile 2 retrospective, we attempted to look at some of these things and call out where we felt like these narratives or supporting practices were becoming problems or leading to poor outcomes or failed transformations. So, why now? Why come up with Agile 2 or even do a retrospective? Well, I think a lot of people are doing retrospective since it was a 20-year anniversary. I know if any of you went to the Agile 2021 conference that we just had, there was a lot of questions about, they even asked some of the original authors, like, if you were to change the manifesto, what would you change today? And a lot of the responses were, it's really based on context. There, you have to remember the context in which it was written, and of course there would be changes given today's environment of how we work and the different technologies and things that we're using. So it seemed like as good a time as any, and there've been multiple manifestos that have been put out over the years, but I don't think they haven't really gained a lot of traction. And this is, we think, the reason why. There's a lot of tribalism that's kind of happened, or fractions that have sprung up, mainly around the frameworks themselves, especially through the monetization of some of these frameworks. And really, I think that that's kind of stifled some of the creativity or innovation in Agile, because it tends to push down those that don't believe kind of in have the same beliefs as those people working within those methods, and you kind of feel like an outsider, or what you're saying is being judged as wrong. And some of the best practices that have risen up, some of them aren't even really in the frameworks themselves at all, but practices have kind of spread up, whether that's misinterpretation of the framework or the manifesto itself. They rise up as kind of extremism, like it's a dogma and that has to be followed. And if, and it's pretty rigid, and people aren't thinking outside those situations. And so we see that as kind of an issue. The other thing is, leadership is virtually ignored in the manifesto. And we see a lot of, in the frameworks themselves, leadership kind of going into the P product owner, if you're using Scrum, or the Scrum Master, and that self-organization is kind of, being touted as the way to go. But we really believe that leadership is a necessary thing, that self-organization for teams require some kind of intent. They have to have the capability. If you don't have some sort of leadership, whether that's decided for the team beforehand, even just to remove impediments for the team. A lot of times when you have self-organizing groups, somebody will emerge as a leader, and that isn't always a good thing. The person that emerges may not be the right person. So we really believe that leadership is a really crucial part of Agile in order for it to have a successful outcome. Other things like DevOps. DevOps was, we saw extreme programming in the very beginning, back in the late 90s. Again, 1998 was when we started using XP. So you saw a lot of the engineering practices, and then with with Scrum kind of, taking the forefront of the, the Agile frameworks, then extreme programming kind of got, pushed to the wayside. And in about 2010, with Jez Humble's DevOps movement, we started to see a rise and people seeing the need for DevOps. Like, you really can't scale Agile or have agility unless you can actually get stuff out the door. So DevOps is a major part of that. And then we also see things that are missing, like new challenges like data. Data wasn't really a part of the original manifesto. It was certainly a part of what was happening, but wasn't necessarily a part of it. And today we see data as an extremely important strategic a part of an organization, and it really should have be brought to the forefront in terms of what we need to think about for data. And then lastly, this is kind of my thing, is I use the words context and balance. I don't think that frameworks are bad. I think that we can pull a lot of good things from frameworks, especially when teams are new and just getting started and they're not quite sure what to do. But I do believe that those frameworks need to be thought of in the context of how they're being used, and that one framework may work somewhere well for one group, but not necessarily work well for another group. And that the practices and things, we should look at those with judgment to decide whether or not they're going to work in our situation. And that situation may change over time as well, and that there needs to be balance. And I think we lost that balance. If you look at the original manifesto, when it says individuals' interactions over processes and tools, it clearly states there's value in the stuff on the right. And what's happened over the years, in my opinion, is we see a lot of the left thinking, but none of the right, and that the right is bad. And I don't think that that's totally true. That's just the way people interpret it or practice it. And so I think that we need to bring back some of that balance. So who was the Agile 2 team? So you can see a set of 15 people here, Lisa being one of them on the call. Thank you. So Cliff Berg was the spearheaded this whole thing. He put a call out on LinkedIn. Some of us knew Cliff from previous working with him. Lisa actually took a DevOps class with Cliff, and I actually met Cliff as part of a coaches meetup in a bar. So that's how I met him. So Cliff was looking for a group of people to kind of retrospect on Agile over the last 20 years. And the main criteria for that was that people were not heavily invested in the status quo. So they couldn't be aligned with, a governing body or any of those things, because we wanted them to have, independent thinking. And then we also wanted diversity of both culture and gender, so that there's also a range of skills in this group here. We've got people with experiences from leadership, organizational change. Some of them are behavioral design, lean product design, engineering, obviously, DevOps and Agile as well. So we pulled from all of those different disciplines because we wanted to have a good kind of cross-section of thought across all of these things to combine our experience and our skills. And again, just like the manifesto, this isn't like, this wasn't a controlled experiment of any kind, really. It was over a period of 8 months that we actually retrospected. And we started off by kind of coming up with what we felt were the key areas or key problems of what was holding Agile back, and we wanted to, from those, after we discovered what we thought those key problems were, we set about generating insights around them. Like, why did we think these things were happening? What was the problem? What could we do differently? And we did that through a series of back and forth writing. So a lot of our work, especially since we had just hit the pandemic, a lot of this was really done through writing. So somebody would write something about a problem, some insights. We would all, put in our own thoughts on that process, on what that problem was, or other insights or experiences that we had had. And we would go back and forth that way. And from that, I think what's important, if you go out to the agile2.net site, where you'll see all of the values and principles and things that we came up with, you'll also see in the back of those, you'll see the underlying problem statements and the insights that we came up with. And we thought that that was really important. We were glad that we had done that written piece, because now we can share that out. And so when you look at the values and principles that we came up with, you can see exactly why in what context we were thinking of those things, right? So we wanted that to be there as well. So we went back and forth, editing, and there were some, a lot of one-on-one conversations and interviews. And so we, created all of that. And then from that, the actual underlying principles and values were actually, Raj Nagapin actually put those together for us. And those were done last. And I think that, when I read some of the problems, or I was going through the documents, I would say to myself, well, you know what? I've never experienced that. I don't really know that I think that's a problem. But if enough people felt it was a problem, we felt it was important to write it down. But even though we may not have experienced it ourselves or agreed necessarily that was a problem, what we all agreed to agree on was ultimately that the values and principles that we put out there was what we all agreed with them. So that was the idea behind it. Okay, so now I'm going to try something that I've not done before. So bear with me. I thought it would be interesting if we did a little retrospective ourselves. So I was going to go ahead and if I can, hold on a second, put it into the chat, into the Zoom chat. There's my Zoom chat not coming up. What do I have? There we go. Okay, so let me see if I can expand this. Okay, I don't know why the chat for some reason is not coming up on my screen. I can't get it to expand.
Here, let me see if I can get it for you.
Okay. Well, let me see if I do this, if it comes up.
My typing's been very poor today.
Okay, if you put that into the chat, what I was going to do is I'll go ahead and I'll open up the poll anywhere it's activated. So the question that I was asking is, what do you think about the state of Agile today? Has it delivered on its promise? So I'd be curious to kind of collect some of your thoughts on that. So if you just go into the into this poll everywhere, and just use the Philippa Fewell 130, it should come up with the question. And you can go ahead and just put anything in there that you're thinking. And if you want to upvote what somebody else said, or if you don't agree with what somebody else said, you can counter it with your own input. So if you want to go ahead and do that, take a couple of minutes to do that. And Steve, I'll let you.
There we go. I finally typed it correctly.
Thank you.
And if anybody tries to...
My Zoom thing's not coming back up for some reason. I don't know why.
And if anybody tries to type it themselves, Philippa has 3 P's in it. So.
All right. So go ahead out there. It's activated. Go ahead and just type what you've seen. I'm interested in hearing what you've seen out there, what you think. And then I'll share back out what you put in there, so you can have that.
It feels watered down.
Yeah, overcrowded. A lot of focus on the framework rather than the principles.
Come on, there's only 2 responses in there. Only 2 of you? Come on. Let's see what we can do.
Oh, now people are going. Yeah.
Well, now Karen's here, so everybody's going to jump in. Only two comments so far? Come on.
We have a couple.
Oh, there we go. I had to refresh. My screen wasn't showing anymore. Very localized. That's an interesting comment.
Mm-hmm. Let me see if I can switch my. I really don't know why this is happening like this. Let's see.
That's okay. Would you like me to share it, or what would you like me to do?
Yeah. So for some reason, it is not letting me back into like the full Zoom mode for some reason. I don't know if that's because I'm sharing my
Might be.
PowerPoint for some reason, or.
All right. I'm
Check
going to
that
share
out
my
back
screen for a
end.
minute then.
Yeah, I think I can do it now. Here, see if I can do this and then move over here.
Too late. I think I have it here.
You do? Okay.
I think so.
Okay. Sorry for the technical difficulty.
No. That's fine.
Okay.
It happens.
All right. Okay. So can you share that, Steve?
Oh, can you so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys don't see it?
No, we saw it, Steve. It was there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was there.
There we go. Well, now I'm glad
Now I
canceled
can't see it. Yeah.
All right.
Oh, now I think I can.
Now
Now I think I can show it to you.
Okay.
Let's see if I can do this. And go back into Zoom and share my screen. Let's see if I can share.
Because if not, I think I can.
Here we go. I think I can share this one.
Cool.
Okay. Let me move this over here so we don't see it. Can you see that?
Looks good.
Okay. So a lot of focus on the frameworks rather than the principles. Less fault with Agile and more with those that seek to implement it half-hearted, or those that implement it via certifications and not culture emphasis, right? So culture is a big thing, and Lisa and Cliff have a group which I participate in called Agile 2 Academy. And one of the things that, is part of that is kind of assessing people's cultures, and people talk a lot in Agile. I hear a lot like, well, it doesn't work because they don't have the right mindset. Well, what does that mean? They don't behave in a certain way, or leadership doesn't act the way that they say that they're going to do things, right? So culture is a big part of that. Without the right culture, Agile doesn't really thrive. So that's a good one. A lot of focus on frameworks rather than principles. Overcrowded. What does that mean? Can somebody explain that one?
I put in overcrowded because it seems like every time I walk into an organization, people are filled with certifications and not much experience. And every time you ask an opinion, you get 40,000 opinions. And many of them come from, there's a lot of material out there, and trying to kind of go through that material and figure out what's good and what is not so good.
Yeah. And certification, training is good. Training is a necessary thing, right? People, especially when they're starting off and they don't know anything, training is a really good foundation, but it doesn't take the place of experience, right? So definitely need to get people with experience. Lots of misunderstanding around the role of leaders. Does somebody want to say what that one means?
Yeah, that was mine. I think it goes back to this thought that, it's one thing to be self-organizing and self-managing for the teams, but leaders that doesn't in any way allow leaders to abdicate their responsibilities. They've got to provide that vision. They've got to provide the decision framework, right?
Yep. Yep. I totally agree. Yep. Leadership is, there's different forms of leadership, right? There's all different forms. Servant leadership is the one that's most touted, but, teams, I like the David Marquette. I don't know if you've ever read the book, Turning the Ship Around, or even seen some of his speeches, but I think he makes it really clear that leadership's responsibility is to create people that can think. Right, and use good judgment, and you do that by asking lots of questions and giving them autonomy, but not giving them that without intent, or making sure that they understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish, and also making sure that they have the capability to make those decisions and to work on their own. And if they don't have those things, then it's up to you as a leader to help instill those things, right? So.
And much in the same vein, Stanley McChrystal said that decentralized execution without a shared consciousness is dangerous, right?
Yes.
Shared consciousness meaning shared vision.
Yes.
Meaning what's that decision framework?
Mm-hmm.
Where are we all headed? Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. When we look at scaling, right, we're looking at, teams aren't just going to automatically collaborate for the greater good. There's still a lot of siloed thinking out there. And so, yeah, definitely leadership needs to help coordinate that and set a shared objective or shared vision for that. Great, thank you. Was originally created for on-site collaboration, might need revisions for better online adaptability. Conline, yeah, right, yeah.
That might be a tool problem more than a collaboration problem.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. With the pandemic, we've had to scramble to use lots of different tools to collaborate and engage people, right? That's still true. Scaling is still immature. Monetization has been a negative influence. I agree with that. What if that's kind of what I was getting with tribalism. It's like, Scrum is really kind of taken over with the frameworks, and with the certifications and things like that. And I think that whole thing of creating, and I think they took a chapter out of PMI's book, really, because it's become a monetarization thing of re-upping and recertifying. Even Scaled Agile Framework does that, at $800, $900 a pop, right? So and what happens is organizations look at these certifications, and I've seen this happen. Recruiters will say, oh, looking for SAFE, 5.0, don't have that certification. Nope, not looking at you. And I've seen that happen to coaches that refuse, that some of the best coaches I've ever worked with that refuse to re-up their certification out of principle, that have been turned down by recruiters because they say if you don't have that certification, they're not even going to look at you. So it's kind of sad.
It's a bad thing when an academic certification replaces experience. And with the PMI, by the way, personal opinion, only speaking for myself, they've made themselves a lot of money and a lot of investments. You'd be just astonished if you saw how much was in their savings, how many stocks, etc. they own. But I stopped re-upping on the certification a long time ago. It was much more important to look at new methodologies, relate to people, relate to how best to adapt in the environment you're in. Where if you're short on leadership in one area, you find it in another, etc. And it's not so much with the methodology, but it's saying that if there's only one book, that's what Agile was not about. It was about the team developing a dynamic.
Right.
But there's a difference between a textbook or following a principle to the letter, the written letter, and actually living it and breathing it And I'll use a phrase we all should be familiar with, being agile versus doing agile.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big difference, and it's hard to get to being agile. These certifications and those monikers kind of slow that train down to get you there. You really have to practice hard and to develop a team to get to that state.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Good. Okay, just a couple more. Has not handled diversity and inclusion well. Who wrote that? Can you give us a little bit on that one?
Sure. So you may know the folks from the Business Agility Institute did a survey recently about diversity and inclusion. And something I personally observed is that because I don't think I'm not saying intentionally, but I'm saying that because things like Scrum tend to favor the majority, there hasn't necessarily always been a mechanism to include minority opinions. And I think that especially when you're doing highly technical work, General Patton once said, if everyone is thinking alike, no one is thinking.
Yes.
So, you know, or like Lencioni, you need a certain amount of creative tension to move things forward. So, I'm glad Evan did his study, and hopefully this is one of those areas that we will move forward in the future. Yeah,
and this actually came up quite a bit in our Agile 2 retrospective, because if you look at, you know, some of the things that some of the events, or the way that it's very much team became the whole focus on team, right? Even though it clearly says individuals and interactions, you know, a lot of the methods, it's clearly a focus on team. And like you said, what's good for the majority, or what the majority thinks. And so you come up with things like team norms and things like that. And I'm not talking around, you know, how we behave. Obviously, we all have to agree on how we're going to behave with one another with respect. We all have to agree on, you know, oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. How psychological safety, making a safe environment, things like that. I'm not talking about that, right? But if we look at some of the things like even like open space, or where people are trying to, you know, gather together to figure out like complex issues and design sessions and stuff. Some people, you know, are great extroverts. They have no problem expressing their opinion, even if it's not the majority opinion. But people that are kind of like more like deep thinkers or introverts, they don't tend to do well in those kinds of environments. They need time to kind of think through things for themselves, and then maybe come back and discuss that, and maybe think some more. So I think that, you know, open spaces, like even team rooms where people, you know, are kind of, you know, lots of talking going on, it kind of favored certain types of individuals. And I think that also is something that we've found in our retrospective. Okay, these are all great. Thanks for doing this. I wish we had time to go through all of them, but I don't think we're going to have time to go through all of them. But I will certainly save these and send them out, because I think it's even if you took them up as a different discussion point, or I'll put them on our LinkedIn site. These are all really great. Thank you for sharing those.
And keep in mind, everybody can go there and give them a thumbs up or thumbs down. So please,
yes,
go ahead and vote on your favorites.
I'll definitely leave it open. So let me escape out of this. All right, are you, let's see if we're back to are we back to the screen, or did I lose all of the slides pretty much? Okay, can you see where we are on the retrospect slide?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I just take care of a couple of questions up front, and I started doing this on one of my talks because I always get these questions, so I figure I'd just knock them out. So the first one is, you know, what is Agile 2? So Agile 2 really is just a set of ideas, all regarding, like, you know, human collaboration, how we work together to develop, if software development's your thing, or support the capabilities that, businesses or part of the business's mission, right? So that could be a product, it could be a service, it could be anything. And the scope, we debated whether it was really just software development, but given today's environment, we feel like it was, much broader than software development. Like I said before, you could apply Agile principles to many things. So what is it? It's really just, again, these ideas that we came up with, much like the original manifesto was kind of a group set of ideas of those signatories. So we have 6 values and 43 principles. Yes, we had more than that, and we had to actually pare it down. And it doesn't replace the manifesto. It was never intended to replace the manifesto. Like I said, a lot of great things came out of the manifesto. Whether you agree with all of the principles, or not, I think you would have to agree that it really was kind of groundbreaking for its time. It really started moving us in the right direction. So no, it's not there to replace it. So it's not a framework or a methodology. Again, we try to stay away from that. What we're doing is saying, hey, use these. How would you use it? Use these ideas, use these insights to maybe think differently about what you're doing. Maybe consider things that you hadn't considered before, that maybe especially if you're new to Agile, rather than just, trying to follow a framework, maybe learn from the experience of others that have been through these things, that have found problems and gained insights, and perhaps you can learn from those things. So that's really what it is. As for the name Agile 2, we actually debated quite a bit what the name should be. Agile, obviously, because it is about Agile, and the 2, we thought, we were afraid people might think of it as a version number. So, okay, there's Agile 2, is there an Agile 3? And it really wasn't meant to be that. It was really like Agile 2 is an evolution or a mature Agile of what we've had in the past. And so we don't expect there to be another version. In fact, we think it's kind of more like an open source. And what we'd like people to do is, if you go to the LinkedIn, actually, if you go to the agile2.net, what we encourage people to do is start a dialogue. Just like we did with your retrospective, are there things that you see that you would like addressed, or that you have insight on that you'd like to contribute to the community? And the same thing, and if you don't agree with something, that's just as valuable. We all come to this with different experiences. Like I said, I didn't agree with every problem statement that my colleagues had, but I did agree on the values and the principles, and that's what was important to me. So why did we use the format? Well, basically because, a manifesto is really just a statement of people's position and ideas, and that's what this is. And people are kind of used to that format, so that's why we did it. So in a nutshell, those are the questions. So like I said, it was do you have a time check? I haven't even been looking at the time. 6:10. Okay.
Oh yeah, we're good.
We're good. Okay. I don't want to just keep rambling if we're out of time. So we came up with, like I said, some primary insights, and these are the primary insights that we came up with. There's a lot of insights on the agile2.net site, so feel free to go in and bounce around. But these were some of the things that we came up with that we all felt were really important. So the people aspects of people, such as leadership, are most important for an organization. It doesn't matter if you have the best framework in the world. If you don't have leadership support, or you don't have the right leadership, it's going to fail. So that's really important. Every method depends on the situation. So there's no methodology or framework that should be used as is. And so again, I see these frameworks as starting points. I use them as a toolbox of ideas. So I pull from XP, I pull from Scrum, I pull from Kanban, I pull from SAFe, I pull from different things. I look at them as a toolbox of ideas, of things that are useful, that have worked for people in certain situations, but may not work in my situation. And so, running it as an experiment with the teams to see, is this going to work for us? Do we need to tweak it? When you go into organizations, there's lots of constraints that you're up against. You can't, there's no ideal environment that I've ever walked into that you could just plug and play. There's so many different factors at play there. So I try to think of it as a toolbox. Extremes usually don't work in most situations. Balance, you have to have some balance. Decentralization and autonomy are essential, but their aspirations not absolute. So this to me is, again, I go back to, self-organizing, self-managing teams. That's a great aspiration. And if you have teams that have I've been on teams that these people have worked together, senior people know what they're doing, have been doing this a long time. They don't need a lot of outside management. They do have inside leadership within them, but they don't need a lot of outside help. But that's because they've been there, done that, have experience, and know what they're doing, and they have the capability to run themselves. Not everything is like that. So a lot of times teams, I've seen situations where, a team is struggling, they're dysfunction, they're following the frameworks, but they're completely dysfunctional and they're not producing anything. And, leadership's response is, well, they're self-organizing, they'll figure it out. Well, that's, to me, a poor response. And that, trust is essential. It's trust both ways, both the people doing the work and the people that are, that they do the sponsors that they're doing the work for. And again, it should be assessed based on people's capability to exercise good judgment. Our values. So when we wrote the values, we can, I think everybody is used to kind of the, the OR, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And we felt that that word kind of led to some of these problems with this, this imbalance, or the fact that taking the left to the extreme over the right was harmful in a lot of ways. So we chose the word and. So we paired concepts that you might think of as opposites, but when we put them there, again, it's a balance and based on the context of your situation is how you would decide whether it's one or the other, or more of one over the other. So these were our values. They're pretty self-explanatory. If you want more information, there's, again, all of this is out on the agile2.net site, as well as in the book. And there are some papers that we've also written that are available out there, specifically on the values and some of the principles, but I'll just briefly go through them. So thoughtfulness and prescription. So prescription is like following something pretty much to the letter, and thoughtfulness is using judgment to modify it. So again, when you first start out with teams, maybe using prescription is good because they don't have anything to follow. They don't know what they're doing. But as you start to see how those things are working within that organization or with the situation that they have, being able to be thoughtful enough to actually maybe change some of those things or try something else. The next one was outcomes and outputs. A lot of places I've been, they focus a lot on outputs. And by outputs, I mean, and there's a lot of metrics on outputs or leading indicators on outputs. So outputs are things that you're actually generating. And then a lot of metrics based on things like, teams will look at throughput or cycle times, things like that, right? But really, business outcome for us was like the most important thing. We're doing this for business agility. All of these methods were, in my opinion, were there in order to enhance business agility. So if we don't have the business outcome that we're going for, it doesn't matter what I'm outputting, I'm not reaching my objective. So the outcome is most important. And I had the privilege of being tutored by a guy by the name of Rob Tomset. And I don't know if you have ever heard of him, but this was like 20 years ago. Rob Tomset wrote a book called Radical Project Management. He was a project management guy, and this was like over 20 years ago. And one of the things that stuck with me, it's a great book, it's a good read, and a lot of the things that he kind of taught were very simple in their approach, but very powerful and impactful. And one of the things that he has is a kind of a little quip thing is he calls it the O3 model. And the O3 model is you work backwards from what business outcome are you trying to achieve? in order to achieve that outcome, what outputs do you need? And then in order to generate those outputs, what's the objective? And so another thing that actually I've seen that comes from Rob Tomset is the sliders. So when you try to define what the definition of success for something is, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's like a 1 through 5 scale, and there's different things on there. One is team morale, one is meeting all of the requirements, one is being on time, and it kind of gets at you can't have everything. And when you put that in front of leadership to agree on, a lot of times they don't agree, and so that's part of your problem. If they can't all agree, your sponsorship and your leadership don't all agree on what those outcomes should be, then you've got a problem. And then individuals and teams. So again, teams are important. There's no doubt that we need teams we need collective, experience and capability in order to produce things, but individuals are also important. And, sometimes there are people that just don't fit well on a team, but they're brilliant and you need them. And you have to find a way to work with these individuals as well. And you have to have ways to collaborate with people, understanding that, they don't all learn in the same way. They don't all, so learning is a big thing. They don't all communicate in the same way. So we have to, make sure that we're inclusive of, I think that's what somebody was getting at before, right? Being inclusive. Fourth one, business understanding and technical understanding. So in today's world, you really can't get away with being a business person saying, I don't really care how you do it, just do it. It's like everything lives on technical platforms pretty much. And there's a trade-off. There's a real trade-off when the business is pushing for more and more features, and we're not taking the time from a technical standpoint to make sure that our code is in good shape, or refactoring, or technical debt, or maybe we need time to do a design that's not emergent but evolves based on some forward thinking, not big upfront design, but some things need to be understood and designed up front. So business needs to understand that in order to make a cost-effective decision as to whether or not they're going to do something, they need to be on the same page with the technology. And on the reverse of that, technical people also need to understand the business and what's driving it. What's our goal? What are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and why, and how important time is a factor on that, or how important the technology is going to be a factor on that. So it's really, they have to go hand in hand. Individual empowerment and good leadership, I think I've pretty much covered that. And then adaptability and planning, I think, that is from the old Agile Manifesto. I think, planning is really great. It helps us assess our risk. It helps us try to think through some of the things that may be coming up. It helps us coordinate across teams, especially when we're trying to scale. But we have to understand that adaptability, things change, and we're going to have to adapt for those things. So I'll pause here to see if anybody has any questions right now before. So I've been talking for a long time. Anybody have any questions? Or Steve?
Hey, how have you seen this introduced in organizations, or is it still a little too new?
So yeah, it is kind of new, and I think with anything like this, there's going to be pushback whenever you start to go against status quo, or you're going to get some pushback, right? And so I think it's been nice to see that people are genuinely interested in it, that people have seen some of these issues and want to do something about it. So it's kind of like a movement in a way. And again, we're not really saying anything different than a lot of things that have been written about, or people have already said these things. And we just kind of collated them and pulled them all together into one kind of, Cliff likes the word weave. We wove them all together into a collective thing. So, but what I just myself, because I kind of believe these things and have been doing these things, I try to bring those into, I try to bring them into the organizations that I go into, just as a matter of how I coach. But you know, it's not really just been kind of put out there. Like I said before, Lisa and Cliff in the Agile 2 Academy, which I still work for CC Pace, but I consult with them, have put together some assessments that look at specifically culture. And they did this with a group called Human Synergistics, which is pretty well known out there. I've done studied 30,000, different organizations, and they correlated success, what they've seen as successful organizations, with the Agile 2, mapping them to these Agile 2 values and principles. And so that's kind of a first step, is what we think anyway. What we think is kind of a first step for organizations is, does your culture align with these values? Or are you just surface, or are you actually believing in and enacting these values? And then also, some assessments on alignment with the Agile 2 principles and alignment with, in the DevOps assessment. So that's just kind of started. They've just got that together. If you go out to the Agile 2 Academy site, you'll see probably a flyer or something. Lisa, are you on the call? I'm not quite sure what they see on the website, because I haven't been there in a while. But anyway, I'll get that from Lisa. I can put it there. But that's kind of a start. But yeah, it is pretty new. We've been doing talks. We did an Agile Reflect talk, and also Lisa and Cliff did a speaking. They had like 200 people or something at the Agile 2021. So it's just kind of starting to get out there. Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'll just do a time check real quick. Okay, 6:24. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these principles because there's 40 something of them, and I'll just touch a little bit on each of them. So here, our first one was planning, transition, and transformation. We've seen a lot of, I don't know about you, but I don't know how many of you have been part of a transformation that failed, or I go into the same organization that I know was doing a transformation a year or two back, and now they're doing it again, or maybe more than once, more than twice. And you got to wonder, why it wasn't successful. And you got to ask yourself, what's going on. And I think that a lot of times when I see failed transformations, I hear, well, the coaches, the coaches, and I'm part of that community. The coaches, blame it on leadership because they're just, the culture's not right, or they're just not, they're not, supportive, or the leadership's going to blame it on Agile and say that it doesn't work for us, and then you're going to see like developers and people are just like, oh, just let us go back to the way we were because this just doesn't fit with what we're doing. And I think a lot of that comes from the approach that people take with these transformations. They think it's a process change, and they take out waterfall and they're going to insert one of these frameworks, and they're going to change all the roles. I've actually been in organizations where they actually fire their PMs, or everybody has to convert to an SM, or otherwise they can't, they don't participate. I was in an organization that they got rid of all the BAs because they thought the PO was supposed to write all the stories. So why did they need BAs? So you see all of these misinterpretations, I think, and it goes back to what somebody said about, the framework and not really thinking about the principles. And really, this is change. This is changing the way people work, the way people think, the way that they collaborate. It's really a human endeavor. And I don't know if any of you have seen the work of a guy by the name of Gil Broza. He's out of Canada, and I really, really like the way that he explains things. And he talks a lot about culture in organizations, and how when he goes in on transformations, it's nothing about frameworks. It's all about how people are going to work together, collaborate together across all of, a value stream. And so I think that, that's kind of, people are not getting that point. And so, it's change. Different organizations can only absorb so much change at a time. People can only absorb so much change at a time. So it's always like this, continuous improvement, running small experiments and continuously improve. And I think people want that silver bullet. They just want it to come in, be done. Like you'll get asked, like, well, how long is this transformation going to take? And the organization that I've been in is, not a huge organization, fairly long, but I've been there 3 years, and we're transforming that whole organization bit by bit. So, product portfolio stakeholders. This one really goes towards, product was kind of left out. We had product owners. And a lot of times product owners, what I've seen is the product owner has domain knowledge, but they're supposed to, feed the team. And, basically they have a day job, so they don't have time. But the PO is basically a proxy or somebody that supposedly understands the market. But what this does is it starts to pull away from, the original manifesto, which said, customer collaboration, and it pulls our teams away from the true customer. And I believe that, all throughout, whether, it's product ideation, product discovery, that as we're doing product discovery, we should be doing, development that tracks to that. And that is the closest we can get our teams to the customer, the better off our results are going to be. So that's what that's about. Data, I think I mentioned data. Data is really important today. I think somebody here was, talking about, AI and the ability to mine and understand the data. Data is important from that perspective, transactional data telling us, how we're doing and what we're doing. It's really important, but it's also really important, product owners, business generally owns the data. And developers need access to real data in order to make sure that they're validating the product, right? So that's also an important concept that I think that kind of gets left off or thought of as a last thing. Frameworks and methodologies, I think we've covered that. Team and organization. So I think this goes back to what we were talking about, collaboration of teams through shared objectives. And I think somebody brought that up in our retrospective, and they said that really well, that, in order for teams to collaborate across, there needs to be decision frameworks and shared objectives. And I totally agree with that. Place limits on things that cause drag, continuous improvement. So this, a lot of this goes back to being able to, do DevOps, to be able to make sure that teams aren't fully committed to capacity. I see, teams so worried about meeting their sprint deadline. It's so much for sustainable pace. They're overworked constantly, every sprint getting more and more features. I know SAFe has an innovation planning sprint, but I know organizations that put SAFe in and don't even give the team an innovation and planning sprint. It's just more time to do more work, and that just burns people out. And so we, believe don't ever commit to capacity. One, because things change, and two, because teams require time to go back and look at reducing their technical debt, or cleaning legacy code up perhaps, or maybe putting in some test automation for that, and looking at bottlenecks, looking for improvements, even if that's policy changes, right? So we all need to be looking for continuous improvement and looking at things that cause drag. So that's kind of the lean concept. Foster deep exchanges. We talked a little bit about this, making sure that people can work uninterrupted, looking at the differences between how people work and making sure we're accommodating them. And then I think we've talked a lot about leadership. And again, there's lots of different kinds of leadership. And I think we got asked the question before, like, well, how do you tell if you have good leadership? So, I think we look for leaders that have, empathy, that are mentoring people on their teams. They know when teams have it covered, they can stay out of the way. But they're also, for me, it's also they're engaged with their teams. They're watching their teams. They know when something has gone awry. They know when the teams are struggling and need help. And sometimes they need to step in, right, and make a decision to help the teams along. So. All right, so if you want more information, I just put a couple of things up here. There's the book, obviously, that we all, 5 of us had put together. The agile2.net site, I encourage you to go to that and express your views. In the LinkedIn group, Agile 2, I think we have about 650 members. And again, we go in there a lot. Lisa's been really great about that. Cliff too is like, so when we do these talks and we can't possibly get to all of your questions, what we do is we take those questions from the chat and we'll actually put them in the Agile 2 LinkedIn group and answer them there. So there's always a dialogue flowing there. So it's a good place to look for stuff. So. Okay, so that's it. I will end there. A lot of talking.
All right. Thank you, Phil. That was a lot of talking.
Thanks.
Come on, everybody come off mute for a
Sorry.
minute. Come on,
That's
everybody come
all right.
off mute. Give Phil a little
Okay.
round of applause here because
There you
she
go.
certainly deserves it. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry,
Well
I rushed a little bit.
done.
Rushed a little at the end. Just trying to push through. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. That's okay. And Karen said, Karen Zanetti says, thanks for keeping ahead of the curve, helping us, everyone. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Greatly appreciate that. It was so good that you brought out some old friends that I haven't seen in a while. So really appreciate
Good.
that.
It's
And
good.
if you guys haven't been to the LinkedIn group, I highly recommend it. There's a lot of good communication going on there. So please jump in. Now, where else can people reach out to you? Can they connect with you?
Absolutely. I'm
Hello?
on LinkedIn. It's Philippa Fewell on LinkedIn. So I'm there. You can always, you can email me if you want to. It's just pfewell at ccpace.com. So you're more than welcome to just email me if you have any questions. You might want to put like Agile 2 question in the subject so it doesn't go to clutter or someplace off to never be seen again.
Oh, I
So-
felt so bad. So somebody sent me a just a hey, checking in, haven't seen you in a while, and it got buried in my email, and I felt so bad because I didn't respond to him for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I do want to see you. I thank you for reaching out. But yeah, we all get busy with emails.
Yeah.
So
And
anyway,
I'll take the retrospective information that everybody put in there. I really appreciate that. I like to collect those because I like to see what people are thinking. It's a community we want to share. So I'll send that to you, Steve, and you can distribute that if you like.
that is awesome. We will put that up on agiledmv.org. We'll also put this recording up there, and we'll put links to the LinkedIn group, which is a great place to go and chat about this stuff. The LinkedIn group is
Sure.
actually
Welcome it.
pretty active. So
Thank you.
a good group. So with that, everybody have a wonderful time. Enjoy the last, the last bit of summer that we have. I know we've got a little bit more, but school is starting soon. I've got an 11-year-old and a 17-year-old that are, have mixed feelings about that. But anyway, we will inspect and adapt and deal with that as we go through.
I don't know. Nothing is worse than twin 16-year-old girls that are in high school.
All right, I'm just going to accept that. I'm not. That's not even something I feel like I could debate or argue in any way. So,
So,
all right, Phil.
all
Well,
right.
thank you so
you,
much. This was
everybody. Thanks
wonderful.
for having me. It's a privilege to speak to everybody, and anytime I'm invited somewhere, I see that as a privilege, and I hope that you got something valuable for your time, for sharing it with me. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
It was awesome to see you.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Take
All right,
care.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.